Welcome to What is Jewish Music, a podcast where we interview prominent figures in different Jewish music circles. In today's episode, I had the privilege of speaking with Yitzy Spinner, a name familiar to many from his early days as a child soloist in the Miami Boys Choir. Today, Yitzy remains a vital presence in the Jewish music world as a professional Chazzan and a respected expert in the history of nusach.
You ready for the crazy part?
His deep knowledge and passion for Jewish liturgical music offer a fascinating perspective on the traditions that continue to shape our musical heritage.
Gotta strain a little bit to see, but here's the date.
1869. Wow. Lead me to the Holy of Holies, where the coffee is.
You got it.
Hey, Yitzy.
Hey.
Thanks for having me in your beautiful show.
Welcome.
It's pretty amazing. I want to jump right back to the very beginning. Your childhood, where you're from, and your first, I guess, memories of anything musical.
Wow, okay, that's a lot of questions right there.
Take your time.
Memories of music, I'll start at the end, are my earliest memories. We always had a house of music. My father was a career, lifetime saxophonist and clarinetist.
Did not know that.
There was always music in the house. His friends were all the musicians of the Jewish music scene, and so I grew up around everyone.
What kind of music did he play?
Jewish wedding music.
Events.
Yeah,
right.
Jewish wedding music, weddings, concerts, things like that.
Cool.
So we always grew up around music. There's always music in the house. There were always music performances, and there were always music personalities. That was really just part of my fabric as a kid. And started singing early. We moved around a little bit as things tend to go.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the New York area. Some time in Staten Island and Brooklyn and New Jersey. Really a little bit of everything, but always local.
Okay.
And music has always been a piece of it. It's when I was in day camps, I was in the choirs, and then it kind of developed, moving into bigger choirs and more structured choirs until I was 8 years old, and then Miami Boys Choir, and then here.
Let's talk about Miami Boys Choir specifically for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the first time that I heard or saw you without knowing that's who you were. I guess me and so many other people grew up on that music. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience? I guess first of all, first of all, for people who don't know what Miami Boys Choir is, let's explain, and then how you got involved.
So for people who don't know Miami Boys Choir, it's one of the most famous Jewish choirs to ever exist. With no offense to your own family connections to choirs, which maybe we should talk about and compare and contrast.
None taken. Go ahead.
But it's a touring choir that's been around for decades and world class, touring the world, held to a very, very high standard of performance and recording. And I auditioned when I was 8, I think it was 8, and was a soloist with them for 5 years or so, traveling the world.
Wow, where did you get to? Where did you guys travel to?
We traveled all over the U.S. We traveled through Europe. There was summer tours.
Right.
We'd end up in Belgium and Holland and London and Israel and Mexico and everywhere else.
What was that experience like being part of?
So I'm not sure I really processed it as a kid. When you're 9, you just kind of go with the flow.
Right.
It's just part of what you do. It's your daily routine. One friend was doing a karate class after school, and one kid was in a basketball program, and I was in a choir. The difference is my choir was traveling, and people recognized me on the street because I was in the choir. So it was a little bit of a different manifestation, but that was the experience. We enjoyed it. I loved it, but I don't know that I was really overthinking it in the moment.
So say that again?
I don't think I was overthinking it in the moment.
Do you remember it being either particularly disciplined or tough or anything like that as a?
So.
Because I imagine to get to the kind of level of it not just being a little choir in someone's house, even as kids, you have to get worked hard.
Yeah. So it is. It was hard work, and it was very disciplined, simply because our practices were an hour a week, 2 hours a week, and it's a bunch of 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids who might not be the most disciplined after school, and so to get productivity done, you have to be tough and you have to be disciplined. I wasn't overly disciplined, but that's what it was, and it was also someone's parnassa who was really riding on this, so it had to be exact. And nobody wants to go to a concert and see a choir that's not great. So
Totally.
we really had to hold to a high quality standard.
Was there like a moment whilst being in the choir where you realized, beyond this is what I want to do in one form or another, or?
No. Again, music was part of my blood. So music was always there, and singing was always there, and performing was always there. I grew up on stage. So there was never a point where I felt comfortable or less comfortable or more comfortable on stage. It was just part of my
Was there a point where you, like a aha moment where you said, this is going to be my career?
No.
Wow.
No. It just I don't know.
Okay, so
I guess became.
So what happened between that and I guess being a full-time Chazzan?
So music was always a passion, not just on the performance side, but also academically. I still love music theory and understanding music.
Did you study?
Yeah, always studied, mostly privately.
Okay.
I did take a number of classes. I minored in music in Yeshiva University, but music study has always been a passion, reading books of theory and studying and trying to dive deep and understand the mechanics behind how things work. And that led me to a little bit of exposure when I was in Yeshiva University in the Chazzan and cantorial program there. And I learned about davening and nusach, and that there was a proper way to sing parts of davening, which I had never known. I just thought you sing them the way that you know them.
Sure.
And then I learned that there were rules and there were techniques, and most importantly at that point that there was a history. And that's really what blew me away. I didn't think that there was much of a history behind it. I just knew what I knew because that's what I heard in shul last week.
Let me back that up for a second and ask you what is nusach at its core?
That's I don't know how much time we have here. Nusach is okay. So there are two definitions to nusach really when we use it in conversation. One refers to the actual words, the actual liturgy.
Sure.
Nusach Sfard, nusach Ashkenaz, nusach Marocai, and a dozen or so others. That refers to the words. And then there's the nusach, which refers to the melodies and the melodic structures. So when studying the melodic structures of our tefillah, our davening, you note that there are rules that are hard rules that should not be broken, and these are centuries old.
When you say rules, the halachic rules, or it's like tradition that's so strong it's basically halakha?
So it's actually both.
Okay.
It started with tradition, going back quite some time before sheet music, right? The advent of sheet music, especially printed sheet music, everything was an oral tradition, and it was passed from mouth to ear for quite some time. So you go back to 800s, 900s, that's when the davening as we know it today was really being developed in a very formal way. Structured way. The Gaonim were really canonizing the structure of the davening as we know it. And along with that came melodies, mostly that were specific to different regions and locations. As things were being composed liturgically, they were being composed melodically. Okay. That predated any sheet music, right? The sheet music that we know today with 5 lines on the staff and all the dots and flags, sure, that didn't exist until much later. Back then, they had a very rudimentary system called neumes, and it was just one line and a little marking that would travel up and travel down, but it wasn't defined. And so,
was that used like universally, or it was specifically a?
No, it actually started outside of the Jewish music world. That started actually in the
Neumes,
Neumes.
Wow.
It was developed under the reign of Charlemagne, who loved music and wanted to hear music being reproduced. So he challenged his court musicians, come up with a system so that you can learn this and then play it again for me next week.
I came up with a system once. It was Shabbos had just started, and it's like right after candlelighting, and I had this melody pop into my head, and I was like, I have to remember this no matter what. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I was like, okay. I took out a package of dry spaghetti.
Okay.
I made myself 5 lines. Made a few bars. I took Advil, and I put the notes on it after Shabbos. I had it. My system isn't still around though. So.
It's. I think they've moved on.
They've moved on.
moved on.
So you said you spoke about people composing. Do we know who those composers were from the very beginning or not really?
Some yes, some no. So if you look at a lot of the older pieces, they're acrostics that have people's names written in them, right? So we know, for example, you look at Lichadodi, which is much more recent, right? You'll see the name Shlomo in there. That'll help you pinpoint. So they don't always exist with, we don't always know who composed them, but as time developed, these became traditions. And then there was a catastrophic moment that happened in the 14th century, absolutely catastrophic globally, which was the Black Death. Black Death and the Crusades all caused havoc all through Europe and all through the Jewish world in general. And everyone kind of converged at that time into the Rhineland. Everyone made their way into the Germanic area. And what would happen at the time is if you came from some shul in some community from, I don't know, 10 kilometers away, and all of a sudden you wound up in this new community, you'd go to shul on Shabbos and you wouldn't recognize anything. You didn't have a sitter. You actually didn't have a physical sitter, right? This is pre-Gutenberg printing press. You had no sitter. So the only melodies that you knew were the ones that reflected those particular paragraphs, because you heard them in your shul from your Chazzan, who learned it from his father, the previous Chazzan.
Wow. So you could walk into shul and just have no idea what's going on.
And you could be fairly close by. And this was catastrophic to the concept of public prayer, because everyone all of a sudden found themselves in this new region, and they all had common interests. They all wanted to pray together, but they couldn't. So there was no commonality.
Wow.
So at the time, the leading authority at the time was the Maharil, and he recognized this issue, and so he was a very well-known, noted posek, as well as a noted Baal Tefillah and a very musical person. He got together all of the different Baalei Tefillah. He had like the first musical conference, got together all the noted Baalei Tefillah and said, okay, let's identify what commonalities we have between us. And he then canonized 52 melodies, 52 specific melodies and motifs that we still use today. And he labeled these.
Give me a couple of examples. Wow, so he wrote those?
He didn't write them.
Okay.
But he said, okay, everybody knows these. These must be.
Got it, okay.
These must be
These are part of like a centralized system of prayer.
Correct. And he labeled them with a very important word. He called them Misinai. And he didn't call them Misinai as though they came from Har Sinai, but he said that these...
They have the same level of importance.
Don't mess with these. Don't mess with these. So there were 52. Kol Nidre was actually added after he died.
What year was this?
It was late 14th century. He was born in 1367.
That's pretty amazing to think that when we stand in shul and sing that, it's almost like explains sometimes like there's always like this sense of, I don't know, reverence or that you feel when you sing these specific songs. And I've never actually stopped to think about it beyond the fact that, okay, I associate that with Yom Kippur or whatever, but not the fact that for hundreds of years, Jews have been singing this same melody, which is wild.
But not just hundreds of years, but globally.
Right.
You can hear this anywhere. And this was what he established. He established the system that you can now travel anywhere in the world and you're still familiar with the tonality of the music. And that was his place, really, and that's where it came from. So now that went from tradition. That's the Maharil. That went from tradition to halacha. The Shulchan Aruch actually quotes in Hilchos Yom HaKippurim. He says you cannot change any of the minhagim or the melodies of the tefillah. And he quotes that in Hilchos Yom Kippur, just to show you how important it is.
Amazing.
And that's where we've gone. The crazy thing about Maharil's place and time is that had he lived 100 years later, this wouldn't have existed. The musicality would not have existed because he rooted everything in the music only because they didn't have a physical sitter to daven from. He died in 1427, 13 years before the printing press.
Wow,
so just 13 years separated the need from music to not needing music. Once everybody had a sitter, all bets were off.
And
everybody would
think about like what it would look like without that. Like
it would just be everybody mumbling. I think that's what it would have been, because there would have been no need for commonality, because they would have had it printed. They would have known everything.
Saying the entire davening would be mumbling instead of just parts of it. It's funny. I was talking to Eli Schwebel about this a couple of weeks ago, and how like it's literally in the Psuke de Zimra, and we've got to this place now where it's like Psuke de mumbling. You know, it's like what, you know, how are we? And I guess it's a whole other conversation, that balance between like spending time in shul, but also people have to go to work. And, you know, going back to nusach for a second, it's really crazy how, I mean, I think music does this in general. Almost when you hear a song, there's lots of associations that will come with it and what they mean to you. I think there was actually a study done, I think with people who had Alzheimer's, and I think they took a bunch of iPods, back when they had iPods and earphones, and went to nursing homes to people who pretty much didn't remember anything, and would go and put these noise-cancelling headphones on with Louis Armstrong or things like that playing, and they would just start talking about like remembering riding a bike when they were 7, because I think it's like actually the last part of your brain that gets affected by this by illnesses is music and the memory of music. But I remember at some point in the last year I went to shul on Friday night, and it's a very informal shul where there's no Chazzan, and they ask whoever wants to daven, and the guy stood up and somehow ended up deep in Yomim Noraim nusach. You know, I'm sure you've seen that happen. And it was wild. I walked home and I was like, why does it feel like Yom Kippur? And I was like, because that's what music does. It has this crazy strength to like put you in a zone.
It's very deeply rooted within us. But there's also the sense of, when it comes to nusach and the way it evokes certain mentalities and certain emotions, is sometimes you hear the wrong nusach, or I hear the wrong nusach, and it's unsettling. Yeah, it's unsettling. You know, right. If you hear the hatikva in major, right. It's off by just a half step, just one note, but it just feels wrong. The mood is wrong, and so that was really the design of the nusach. The design was for people who don't have a book. You can still listen and understand the emotions that are happening, even if you didn't know the particular words. I
also think that there's something about, and it's the same reason a nigun has the power that it has, because even if you don't understand the words or you don't know the words, everyone can sing a melody. How do you feel about the balance or need for a balance between nusach and, I guess, maybe more approachable styles of davening, whether it's kolbach or, nowadays people just taking any song that will, I guess, unite people, that people know, and put it together? Where is there a place for that within tradition?
So there's a very defined place for that, at least within the Maharil's framework. The Maharil, when he put down that 52, 53, he only referred to specific cadences and specific modes and motifs, and didn't say that you could never deviate and incorporate new melodies. Okay. What he said was that there are certain points when you have to use given melodies, and for the large part of davening, we just have to stay within certain scales and certain modes. So if something is going to be in major or something's going to be in minor, it's up to the Baal Tefillah, the Shliach Tzibur, to improvise, to be able to connect with the people who are davening. Which means that if you want to use a song that's in minor when the nusach is in minor, that's fantastic. Right. But to put something that's in major when something is supposed to be minor, that's when it ruins the mood and the emotion that's supposed to be there, that stems from the words. Right. So that's when it gets shot. I use popular melodies all the time. I love nice, energetic, participatory davening, but it still has to evoke the right. Yeah, you can really feel like in a room where I think Slichas is also one of those times of year where you really, it's like the words are so, I don't know what the word is. They're accessible. They're accessible. Yeah, but and the second you, like sometimes actually a very simple pop melody or a popular melody can really help draw everyone in, and you can really feel that. 100%. 100%. Slichos here is it's a special night. I experienced it once. It was pretty amazing. Yeah. I usually hold off on this question, but let's just ask it now. What is Jewish music? What do you think Jewish music is? I think I have the same question you have. Jewish music is something that connects you from a very deep emotional place. It's something that can't be learned. It's something that can't be explained. It's something that can only be felt. Jewish music is a kumzitz. Okay. Jewish music is davening in a room when everyone is feeling passionate and inspired and affected. Jewish music is whatever connects you beyond the need to just listen for enjoyment. If we're listening to music in the background, that's functional music. It's great. It serves a wonderful function. If I have music playing in the car, I enjoy it. It serves a purpose. But I think the Jewish part of the music is what makes me feel more than just listening to music.
It's not just a passive experience.
I feel the music different, right? It's a religious experience. Comes from a completely different place, and it touches a different part internally.
Right.
It's an emotional experience.
I guess has almost like a large element of spirituality.
I think it's rooted in spirituality. Right. I think it's rooted in spirituality. There are certain melodies that we hear, that we use, that they just take us to a completely different place in time. You can close your eyes and connect with people across the world, people across time, people across centuries. You close your eyes during Birkat Kohanim, and it puts you in a completely different space, right? That transcends where we are and when we are. To me, there's an element of Jewish music that has no boundaries. That's the davening experiential side. The performance side, which we do at concerts and weddings, and also, I think has its root there. I think it does have its root there. It's influenced by every other culture around us, but I think its root is really there, and that's what takes us to a different place. It's why we can sit down at a kumsitz and take our favorite kumsitz song, which might not work during davening, but you can sit and close your eyes, put your arm around your friend, and really feel this passion that you won't be able to feel with any secular song. They might be similar. They might have similar chord structures and similar meters and similar instrumentation, but that's Jewish music. It's something that connects with something
like that
you just can't
I think my favorite part about asking everyone that question is right after the question, there's always a sigh. When you watch it back, you're going to see everyone does a big sigh, and they're like, not sure. Is he trying to trick me?
Because there's no definition.
There isn't. And I think the thing that I'm learning the more I do this and speak to more people is that people's answers are quite personal based on who they are and the way they grew up and their personal experiences with music. How do you, I guess my next question is, how do you feel Jewish music, I guess in the more modern sense, has changed from when you were a kid to say now, and the music that's available for your kids?
So I think today's music world is produced more commercially. It has to be more commercial because today we're competing with everyone out there.
Right.
When I say everyone out there, I mean we're competing with the globe. Now there's social media. Now there's just different ways of delivering. Spotify didn't exist. It was a whole different world. When you wanted to hear music, when I was growing up, you had to go to the store and physically buy a cassette. And whatever cassettes they had, that's what you were going to have access to. Right. Whatever cassettes you could carry with you, it sounds crazy, right? But that's what you had. You didn't have access to millions of songs. You didn't have access to everything that's ever been recorded. So because of that, the competition today is real. There's a need to keep up, and there's a need to keep competing, and there's a need to constantly revolutionize what's there because everything else is also accessible. So it was a very different style of delivering.
My kids are like, hey, Alexa, play anything.
Right, but not only genre. Like back then it was like, okay, which Kol HaChai CD or cassette do you have?
You knew
it from top to bottom. You knew every song. When a song ended, you already knew what song was coming and what key it was coming in because you already had listened to that experience. Today, today my kids, we're in the car and it's play this song by that person and this song by that person. My kids have never listened to an entire album production.
Right, and I guess albums are being...
And that's done.
Right.
Great. It's a very different delivery system. And not only that, and then it's moved even from the recorded to the video recorded.
Right. I saw a video, I think on Instagram, someone explaining, there's a lot of talk about AI and where all of that stuff is headed. And he was saying that what he imagines being our reality in a few years is that you're going to open Spotify or some version of Spotify and you're going to say, play me a song that is sung by Mordechai Ben David and Yossele Rosenblatt in the style of A.B. Rottenberg and it will use all the information it has and create that, which is wild. But I think saying that today, I don't see that as being super unrealistic. I don't think it's so far from that.
No, I don't think it's that unrealistic. It's unfortunate because it takes the artistry.
Sure.
It takes the artistry away from the artist. But I don't think it's that unrealistic. Especially as different artists, and this feeds the AI algorithms, I would think, as different artists become influenced by other people. It's very hard to find an artist today who's hyper-focused and true to self.
Right.
Everyone is trying to incorporate other influences, and that's why the lines get very blurred.
I think also there's kind of like an obsession with numbers, and it's like, okay, well, who's the most trending? And well, if this kind of voice is, I remember there was like, I'm trying to think of an example of the vocalist, but there was it was like particularly in female pop vocals, like about 5 or 6 years ago, everyone was sounding the same to the point where it's like there's almost like these mini speech impediments that they're all copying, like, what are you guys doing? You all have your own voice. When you think, I guess, ahead, I don't know, 20 years time, and the way that music and Jewish music is headed, and also this like deep, rich culture of nusach, where and how do you see that playing out? Do you think nusach will be around forever? Is it eventually going to be, I don't know, moved to the side by pop songs, or where are we going?
It's a really good question. I'd like to believe that it's going to continue. That's one of my missions, is to teach and to allow people to understand that there's more to what we do than just opening up a siddur and choosing, our favorite wedding song or our favorite candid song. There's a lot more than that, and we're deep in a tradition. I have a shir coming up that I'm giving, leading into Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, about the piyutim that we skip. Right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that we skip that either is in our machzor in like a gray box, or maybe even in the back of the machzor.
Some communities say, okay, well, a minute.
Right. But this is a very important part of how we got to today.
Right.
That's really the conversation, is how did we get to today and what our davening sounds like today? And I think if we don't protect how we got here, we risk losing even more as we go further. So there are people like me who are professional chazanim who don't get up and just do cantorial, performance arts from the bima. That's not my style. It's not my interest. I think that there are two parts of the cantorial world. There's the performance side, which has a tremendous resurgence right now, which is amazing. But that doesn't talk to the nusach of our davening. That talks to the performance art of the cantorial side of things. And then there's the purist side of how our davening developed and got to the way it is today. And that's what I'm trying to preserve. And a number of other people like me are trying to preserve and to teach this.
I think, as you started talking about this and you said something along the lines of wanting to educate, I realized that I think for many, many people, people will recognize the tunes, as we discussed before, and they'll, this puts me in this kind of mood, and that song puts me, or that melody puts me in that kind of mood. But there is a complete lack of education. No one learns about this stuff. It's assumed, okay, it's part of a culture. You go to shul, you know it. And I think that's almost like the missing piece. If people understood why and where, even the stuff you told me just now, I didn't know. And everything kind of has like an added level of importance of like why and where it came from.
The context is very important. Use a simple example. The most popular melody that we all hear these days for the Misha Berach V'Chaylim. Right? We hear it all the time. Right. Misha Berach. Most people call it the Misha Berach V'Chaylim. They don't know where it comes from. Right. When you understand that when Shai Abramson married it to the melody of El Eretz Tzvi, it takes on a whole different level of significance. Sure. But imagine the people who heard that adaptation for the first time. They knew the words, they knew the song, but all of a sudden it took on a completely different level of significance. We now take that for granted because we hear it all the time.
Right, and I guess also, if you live outside of Israel and you're not overly connected, then you hear a pretty melody and it's like another pretty melody.
Correct.
Yeah.
I taught recently the Ani Mamin that we associate with
yeah, sure.
with Tisha B'Av and Kumsitz. You think it's a beautiful song. It is. It's a beautiful, haunting song. When you understand that it was written, in the cattle car on the way to Treblinka, that changes things. But most people don't know these stories. They don't know the backstories of these things. So understanding where the melody comes from, why the melody comes from, and what the need was to even compose it, it just takes you to a completely different place. And I think that's the way davening developed. That's the way the sound of davening developed. And that's one of my missions, is to try to teach and try to share it.
Okay, and I also know you travel a lot. On your travels, can you, I guess, talk a little bit about things that you may have noticed in different places, variations or differences in nusach or musical styles?
So I travel a lot. And one of my favorite things to experience is a native setting of nusach, both liturgically, as the words present, as well as the music. I spent Shabbos a few weeks ago in Rome, and the community of Rome has its own nusach that they've held intact and unaffected since Chorban Bayis. It's a 2,000-year-old nusach.
Wow.
The Siddur B'nai Roma is unique. I actually was fortunate enough to get a copy of the Siddur B'nai Roma. They don't release them because they don't want this getting out there. But I have a copy on my desk. It's amazing as an academic study tool to understand the development of how they stayed pure and everything else around it was moving. That was amazing. And I sat through davening, and I've led davening how many times in my life? I don't know. I could not lead the davening there. Their melodies were similar but different. The structure of the davening was similar but different. The phrasing of the words, similar but different. 2 weeks later, I was in Vienna for Shabbos, in the Stad Temple, where the shul built in the 1820s. It was gorgeous and beautiful. And in that shul, the first Chazzan of that shul was Chazzan Solomon Sulzer, who composed in that room for that community things like Shema Yisrael.
Wow.
To be able to hear that in the room where it was first sung was transformative. That's beautiful. And sometimes I get to experience moments like that where I see things that are completely unlike anything else that we experience here, because they're from communities that have stayed consistent longer than we have. Right? We're the migrants.
Right.
America is a baby in comparison to, there are people who even moved from other countries to America. And so that just takes on a whole different migratory pattern when everything just becomes this melting pot of davening, which is why it's important to keep things tried and true. But in communities like Rome, communities like Marrakesh in Morocco, where I've been many times leading davening, it's fantastic, because it's a snapshot into not just who they are and what they sound like today, but it's the same who and where 1,500 years ago.
Crazy.
It just hasn't changed.
It's a wild thought. Here's a question. If you were in a stadium that was big enough to, not to hold all the Jews in the world, but to hold a representation of all the Jews in the world, and they said, Yitzy, you have to choose one song that everyone's going to identify with and everyone's going to sing, what would you say?
So what's the best known Jewish song across the globe? That's the question.
I guess so.
What's the best known Jewish melody across the globe? It might be Kol Nidre.
Okay.
It might be Ma'oz Tzur.
Interesting. Even in the Sephardi world?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It might be Hava Nagila.
Okay.
Right. We're like, these are such different components of who we are. It might be something from the Seder. I think that it's going to be something. Yeah, I think that it's going to be something that's tied to something religious. I don't think it's going to be a popular melody.
Interesting.
I think it's going to be tied to an experience.
Does everyone use the same tune for Kol Nidre?
Yes, as far as I know.
Wow.
As far as I know. Kol Nidre is
a crazy thought.
So the Maharil did not use that tune for Kol Nidre. He famously did not. His students canonized and added Kol Nidre as number 53 to that list later on. Kol Nidre is a beautiful piece. Kol Nidre is the greatest hits of Yomim Noraim.
Who wrote Kol Nidre? Okay.
It wasn't really written, it was compiled. Kol Nidre is quotations of the rest of Yomim Noraim. So for example, Kol Nidre is Iskada.
Oh, interesting.
Right? And then you have quotes, right? Ushu Asana Lashuos is a quote from Aleinu.
That's crazy. I've never thought about that.
So that's the point. The point of Kol Nidre is you get to shul,
and you get like a taste of what's to
feel everything all at once in one paragraph.
So I could go to Kol Nidre and then just stay home for the rest of it.
Probably, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. Talking of Miles Tzor for a second, is that originally from a piece of Bach or something, or did I make that up? Do you know what its origins are?
Yeah, I believe it's a German pub tune.
Actually?
Yeah.
Because it does sound very not Jewish.
Yeah, it's not of Jewish. It's not of Jewish origin. I think it's a German pub tune.
Oh, okay, that explains that.
Yeah.
Listen, there's more than one Chabadnigun that's a Russian drinking song. So
there was a lot written several years ago about Hatikva being influenced by Smetana's Moldau.
I think I saw that actually.
Yeah, that's how music works. There are only a finite number of notes and chord progressions that can exist, and so eventually something's going to sound like something else. That's, as a composer, that's our biggest fear. Every time I write something, first thing I do is I play it for people and say,
does it sound like anything?
Right, did I write this or did somebody else write this?
Yeah. So can you tell me a little more about your childhood, your family, where and how you grew up?
So, grew up in the New York area. Lots of music always being played in the house, performed in and out of the house. Musicians in the family. My father, some other relatives played instruments. Lots of singers. Some Bali Tefillah, not professional, but there was always music. We were always singing, and that just kind of led to a life of being fully engrossed in music, playing piano, playing guitar, picking up a couple of instruments. There were always instruments around the house.
Any high school bands or anything like that?
Yeah, nothing I'm proud of.
Nothing we could put in the show notes, okay?
nothing I'm proud of, but we had fun. We had fun, which is what music was designed for as a teenager. And then I went to yeshiva after high school, and we had a great band where we performed, had a great time. We wrote and performed a song that really actually took off. It was "Flipping Out" was our yeshiva song.
1 second, you wrote "Flipping Out"
with Dov Rosenblatt. Yeah,
no
it was a
way.
precursor to Blue Fringe back in the day.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't believe we nearly didn't talk about that.
It's a long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember sitting in the dorm room, talking about how we were going to have a section of the song where, like, I'll say something and you come up with something that rhymes. And then I said, something about cholent. And Dove said, but nothing rhymes with cholent. We're like, that's it. Nothing rhymes with cholent.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a long time ago.
Okay, that's...
Mm-hmm. So from there, I ended up singing Kol Nidre.
Well, if nothing rhymes with cholent, then let me...
Yeah, so I was in yeshiva, and then I went to Yeshiva University after that. And by accident, I found out about their cantorial program. It's the Bell School of Jewish Music, where they teach nusach. They teach the development and history of nusach and why it's important and how to use it. And it's a very underappreciated program. And I signed up for a class there to study Kabbalah Shabbos, because I already knew Kabbalah Shabbos, figuring this was just going to be the easiest class I'd ever taken. I already knew it. Why not?
Right.
And I took it with Sherwood Goffin, who was a dear friend and a gem of a human who I miss terribly. Oh. I was very close with him. And I had already performed with him years earlier with Miami Boys Choir. And so I had this relationship, and we knew each other. And he came over to me at some point during this series of classes and says, you could do this. And we spoke and developed a plan. And by the time I finished... So
he was like a mentor to you?
Absolutely. Whatever I couldn't catch in his class, I used to go to his apartment and study with him literally in his apartment. So he was really a mentor and a dear friend. And from the time that began until I finished my undergrad studies in Yeshiva University, I finished the cantorial program. So I left with.
So it started off as let me do an easy class, and ended up becoming a career
and a passion, not just a career, but a real passion. Largely because of him, not just academically, but because his passion for the study and the understanding and the influence of what davening really meant and means is what led me today to here. So I've studied with him and with many others along the way, and have come to appreciate a different side, really a different side of it all.
I want to talk about something which is not directly related to music, but is definitely a part of you, or no longer part of you anymore, which is you recently, well, why don't you tell everyone? Assuming you know what I'm talking about.
I think I know what you're talking about. I recently donated a kidney, which is becoming more common, but still not very common. It was February of 2023. I was literally next door to the shul at an event that was an awareness event and a fundraising event to try to bring awareness and raise some funds for an organization called Renewal, which matches Jewish kidney donors to Jewish kidney recipients, people in need. I had once had exposure to Renewal before, which was strangely on a boat in Panama. I was sitting next to this lovely, lovely couple when I was on the boat in Panama in a small little canoe. And it was, hey, who are you? What do you do? And he was one of the higher ups at Renewal. And that's when I first heard about the organization. And then that entered the subconscious parts of my mind. And then I was next door to the shul, and we had this function, and my wife and I made a donation, wrote a check, and at the exit there was a swab station where you could swab, and I did, with 100% confidence that I would never match. Because who matches, right? Like whoever does. And put that aside. And then 8 months later or so, 7-8 months later, it was in end of October 26th, I got a call from a 718 number that I didn't recognize. And I remember exactly where I was standing in my basement, what direction I was facing. It's a moment frozen in time. And I answered the phone and I said, hello. And the person on this side said, hi, it's so-and-so. I'm calling from Renewal. And I said, oh, thank you so much for calling. I already gave this year. And I thought it was a fundraising call. And she said, thank you for your donation, but you matched. Wow. And I dropped the phone. And it took me a second or two or three, I don't remember. I picked up the phone and she told me I wasn't the first person to drop a phone. And we had a lovely conversation. And I learned about what it might be to be a kidney donor. And gained the confidence on that phone call and in subsequent phone calls and interactions to learn about the process of medical testing and screening, and went through a very eye-opening experience over the next several months of medical testing to make sure that I was absolutely healthy. It's a very interesting nuance in the kidney donor system where they actually don't try to qualify you to be a viable kidney donor. They actually try to disqualify you because they never want to make the decision for you. They want to empower you to make the decision yourself. So there were tests, blood tests and EKGs and ECGs and CAT scans and chest X-rays.
You really have to want to do it.
So what they do is they get all the different departments and psychologists and nutritionists and pharmacists. They get everybody in.
Anywhere they can fail you.
Anywhere they could fail you. And they do all these tests. And then they have a meeting. And they tell you, okay, we've done all the tests and we're meeting on Friday. And they actually all sit around a table and everyone presents their own findings. And if at the end of that meeting, no one has found a reason to disqualify you, then they give you a call and they say, okay, we would give you the green light if you still want to do this. That's how it works. Over 50% of people who match end up failing the screening for one reason or another. Family history. I know of 2 people who went to donate and found out that they were born with 1 kidney. They actually didn't even know. Wow. So there could be a number of things that could disqualify. It doesn't mean you're unhealthy. It just means you're just not qualified.
You need the one that you have.
And so that was the process. That was the the screening process, and then we set a date for surgery on February 12th of 2024. I went to Hackensack Medical Center and donated a kidney. Donated to a stranger, which was a surreal experience, one that I'm still trying to process. I had a very hard time processing.
The fact that you didn't know who it was going to be?
Not the fact, no. That was a piece of it.
Sure.
That was a piece. There was a certain magic in knowing that I was at a number of weddings performing in the weeks leading up when I realized that someone in the room might be that person. It might be that person's uncle or that person's neighbor. Like it was right. Someone out there who I couldn't identify, but that I could change someone's life in the process.
Did they tell you anything about, obviously not who the person is, but I don't know what their situation is and how
so they offered, do you want to know the profile? Do you want to know the age? Do you want to know the gender? I didn't want to know.
Right.
I didn't want to know. I didn't think it mattered.
Sure.
I didn't want to make a decision or be influenced by any of the details. And that was it. I had a very hard time processing. I came to a really good headspace. I was in Israel a few weeks before surgery, and I met with a couple of Rabbanim, noted Rabbanim and Poskim, and two of which gave me two pieces that really have carried me through the surgery. One said to me, asked for bracha, and he said to me, he said, I would give you a bracha of refuah shalema, but you're not sick. So you're still healthy. So he said, I'm going to give you a different bracha that when you emerge from the surgery, he said, you won't be chaser. He said, you'll be malay.
Wow.
He said, you'll be like a brand new person. He said, bria chadasha. You'll be like a brand new person. And he said to me, titchadesh, on your new body. That was his.
Wow.
That was his message.
Which inspired a song.
Yeah.
Right.
I process through music. I'm sure you the same. Sometimes you just sit down at a piano and then hours go by and you don't even realize because that's just how we process. And that was my way of processing. So that became my. It was a message given to me, titchadesh for me, tischadesh on my new being, my new existence. But I decided to pass that along to this person out there.
Wow.
Who I didn't know.
You eventually met the person.
I did.
Can you tell me about that moment?
I did. So some 2 months later or so was an annual gathering for renewal. They do a big Shabbaton, which is one of the largest gathering of one-kidneyed people out there. And they had asked me to do a big performance after Shabbos. Lots of performers, lots of music, great energy and vibes throughout the room. And so they had asked me if I would perform this song, which I had released. I recorded the song 4 days before surgery. And they had asked me if I would perform the song, and I got up on stage, and I was sitting at the piano, just getting ready. Yossi Green had just performed. I had just performed a song with Yossi. He's standing off to my left, and I'm just getting the sheet music ready and everything. And then the director of renewal is on stage, and he's kind of filling time while I'm getting situated. And he turns to the crowd, and he says, Jeff, come on up. And up walks this man, and he's just talking to Jeff, and I'm at the piano still, waiting for my cue. He says to Jeff, I want you to meet your donor. And he turns to me, and it was
You didn't know that was going to happen?
No. It was wild. It was really, really wild.
How do you sit down and play a song after that?
That was the hard part. And then I said, and now I have to not only play the song, so here's a song that I wrote as a message for, any kidney donor recipient, but also to this person. And then he sat next to me.
Wow.
It was, I don't remember a moment of it because it was just,
right.
It was an out-of-body experience.
Wow.
And we're still in touch. He actually texted me just a couple of weeks ago just to check in, let me know. It's a crazy thing.
That's unbelievable.
It's a crazy experience.
All right. Thank you for your time, Yitzy.
Of course.
Sharing your story and all of that. So much interesting information. We could definitely chat just about nusach or any of this stuff for hours. But yeah, thank you again.
Of course.
And I actually think, unless you're opposed, I think we need to perform something with that little...
With this organ here?
With this organ here in the shul with this reverb.
Avinu Vaneinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masih. Vibrato is fun, right?
Right, yeah, okay. No, I'm just, Bobby, can you help me put this in my car? Yitzy, thanks so much,
It's like,
man.
it's a manual Leslie.
Yeah.
You know? Super.
Dude, that was great.